My name is Doris Martin. I'm 35, a freelance graphic designer, and the woman my family loves to label as selfish. But if you ask me, I've simply learned that boundaries are a survival skill. My grandfather Harold taught me that he was the only person who ever made me feel seen, not just tolerated. And when he passed away 3 years ago, he left me something more precious than I ever imagined: his mountain cabin. That inheritance became both a gift and a curse. I still remember sitting in the lawyer's office, numb from the funeral hands clasped tightly in my lap. My parents were busy murmuring about schedules already slipping back into their corporate lives. Then the lawyer leaned forward, glasses perched low on his nose, and said, "Doris, your grandfather left the cabin solely to you." Not my mother, not my father, not his other children or grandchildren, just me, his middle granddaughter. The room went still. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father cleared his throat like it was a business deal gone sour. My cousins exchanged side glances, already calculating what this meant. But all I heard were the lawyer's next words. He was very specific. He wanted you to have the cabin because, and I quote, "Doris is the only one who will appreciate it for what it is, not what it could be worth." I felt my throat tighten. That was exactly something Grandpa would say. To my family, the cabin was a rustic piece of real estate. To me, it was a sanctuary woven into my childhood. Flashbacks tumbled over me as I signed the papers summer nights catching fireflies on the porch, while Grandpa told stories of his youth. Mornings spent fishing in the lake, silence broken only by the splash of the line. Afternoons curled up by the Riverstone fireplace sketchbook on my knees while he read. In those pine-scented walls, I wasn't the difficult daughter or the selfish cousin. I was simply myself. But reality hit hard the first time I returned after the funeral. The cabin, though, still standing tall against the backdrop of the Blue Ridge Mountains, bore the scars of time. The roof leaked in 3 places. The plumbing coughed like an old smoker. Paint peeled from the shutters. My grandfather had maintained it as best he could, but his health had waned. The place needed love, a lot of it. Most of my family thought I should sell. "It's a money pit," my mother warned. "You don't have the skills for this," my father added, almost smug. And my cousin Allison, ever the opportunist, offered to buy it at a family discount for her husband's real estate business. But the thought of selling felt like betrayal. This wasn't just a structure on 3 acres of land. It was Grandpa's legacy, his final message to me that I mattered, that I deserved something of my own. So I made a choice. I would restore it, even if it drained my savings, even if it broke me. Every weekend for that first year, I drove 3 hours from Charlotte into the mountains. At first, the silence inside those decaying walls felt unbearable, the weight of grief pressing into every corner. But as I hammered nails, scrubbed floors, patched leaks, and replaced beams, something inside me shifted. I hired professionals for the electrical and structural work, but the rest I tackled alone. YouTube tutorials became my late-night companions. Hardware store clerks knew me by name. A retired carpenter from town showed me how to sand wood without losing its character. And with every blister, every sweat-soaked shirt, every aching drive back to the city, I felt closer to my grandfather. Piece by piece, the cabin transformed. I kept the hand-carved bookshelf he had made, just refinished the surface. I preserved the fireplace, only adding a more efficient insert. I updated the kitchen with modern appliances, but insisted on keeping the rustic wooden countertops Grandpa installed decades ago. It became a blend of old and new memory and independence. And as the cabin changed, so did I. Yet even in the quiet, I felt a prickle of unease. My family's eyes were never far away. At first, they mocked my progress, calling it a vanity project. Then, as I began posting photos online, the comments shifted. "Oh, it looks beautiful. We should come visit sometime." That we always made my stomach knot. Because with my family, visiting rarely meant respecting. It meant taking. Borrowing clothes that never returned. Money loaned and forgotten. Plans rewritten, so I'd always be the one to bend. My childhood was full of such small invasions disguised as love. One memory came back to me often during those weekends when my sister opened my diary, read it aloud at the dinner table, and my parents laughed instead of scolding her. I had stormed off crying, only to have Grandpa find me later at the cabin sitting by the fireplace. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, Doris. Don't get mad, get clear. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary." Those words clung to me now, years later, as I restored the place he'd left in my care. By the second year, the cabin was livable again. The leaky roof was sealed, the plumbing functional, the porch sturdy under my feet. For the first time, I felt like I had carved out a space in this world that belonged wholly to me. My freelance work kept me afloat, but the cabin gave me something my clients' projects never could, a tangible sense of accomplishment. Still, I wasn't naive. Family patterns don't disappear. So after hearing about minor vandalism at nearby properties, I invested in a comprehensive security system. Cameras, smart locks, motion-activated lights, even a two-way speaker system. At the time, it seemed like overkill. But deep down, I think part of me already knew. My family wouldn't let the matter rest forever, because in their eyes, nothing truly belonged to me. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching fireflies rise from the grass, I whispered into the cooling air, "This is mine, Grandpa. They won't take it." But the mountains held their silence as if they knew a storm was already gathering. And when the first wave came, it wasn't through a knock on the cabin door. It came through a buzz on my phone, a flood of family group chat notifications that would change everything. But that's a story for another part. For now, what mattered was this: the cabin was mine. But peace rarely lasts long when entitlement runs in your bloodline. And I had just rebuilt a fortress my family was already plotting to invade. When I first unlocked the cabin's door after inheriting it, the smell of dust and damp wood hit me like a wall. The air was thick, heavy with neglect and time. I remember standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the water stains dripping across the ceiling like veins, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by refusing to sell. But then I touched the Riverstone fireplace, the one Grandpa and I used to sit beside. His voice carrying me into stories of his youth, and I knew I couldn't walk away. This wasn't a burden. It was a challenge, a calling. The work nearly broke me. Every Friday night, I packed my car with tools and supplies and drove 3 hours into the mountains. Saturdays began at dawn, with sunlight cutting through the mist, illuminating the cabin's weary frame. I learned quickly that no job was as simple as it looked. A single loose shingle turned into repairing whole sections of the roof. A dripping faucet led to hours of battling rusted pipes under the sink. My hands' blistered nails chipped back ached. More than once I collapsed into the old armchair, Grandpa's chair, feeling like a child again, overwhelmed and too small for the task. But each weekend I returned stronger. I watched tutorials late into the night, pausing videos, rewinding, scribbling down notes. Local hardware store employees chuckled when I walked in yet again on Sunday mornings covered in sawdust, clutching a list scribbled on the back of receipts. Some even began offering advice unprompted: how to seal a leak properly, which wood treatment would last longer against mountain storms. And there was Jack, the retired carpenter, who lived 2 cabins down. He would stop by occasionally, leaning against my porch railing with a steaming mug of coffee. "Don't sand against the grain," he'd say, or "that beam will hold if you reinforce it here." His guidance was spare, but invaluable. The cabin began to change before my eyes. I scrubbed years of grime from the floors until the wood glowed with warm tones. I refinished Grandpa's hand-carved bookshelf, tracing my fingers over grooves where his tools had once pressed. I kept the cabin's rustic charm intact, but introduced touches of my own new appliances, softer lighting, carefully chosen paint colors. With each nail hammered, each board replaced, I felt my grief untangle and transform into something quieter, steadier. It wasn't just restoration, it was resurrection, for the cabin and for me. At first, my family's reaction was dismissive. "You're wasting your savings," my mother said over the phone. Her tone was sharp, like she was warning me about a doomed investment. My father added, "One day you'll regret sinking money into that shack. And Allison." She laughed. "If you change your mind, I'll still make you a fair offer." But then something shifted. As weeks passed, I began posting small updates on social media, photos of freshly painted shutters, a repaired porch swing, sunlight pouring through newly cleaned windows. I didn't think much of it. For me, it was a way of documenting progress, holding myself accountable. Yet suddenly the tone from my family changed. "Oh wow, it looks beautiful," Allison commented under one photo. "The kids would love to stay there sometime." My Aunt Diana texted, "That fireplace looks so cozy, perfect for family gatherings." Even my father, who had scoffed at my plans, muttered during Sunday dinner, "Well, I suppose you're making something of it after all." Their words unsettled me. They sounded admiring on the surface, but I could feel the edge beneath. Because in my family, compliments were often preludes to expectations. And expectations always came with strings. I remember sitting on the porch one evening after a long day of work reading their comments, unease pooling in my chest. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice. Don't get mad, Doris. Get clear. They'll test your boundaries. It's up to you to hold them. That summer, I finally invested in the security system. Neighbors had been whispering about vandalism at a few properties, broken windows, overturned mailboxes. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make me wary. I told myself the system was just a precaution, but part of me knew better. Installing those cameras, smart locks, and motion detectors wasn't just about protecting against strangers. It was about preparing for something far more familiar. When the system lit up for the first time, floodlights spilling across the driveway, cameras swiveling with mechanical precision, I felt a surge of relief. A fortress, I thought. For once in my life, I had a place my family couldn't just walk into. But still the unease lingered. Because history had taught me that when my family wanted something they didn't ask, they took. They framed it as tradition, as love, as family sharing. But what it always meant was that my boundaries didn't matter. That lesson had been etched into me long ago. The time my cousin Thomas borrowed my laptop in college and deleted my essay draft because family doesn't need to ask. The time Allison returned my favorite sweater with a cigarette burn and laughed it off. The time my mother opened my mail before I even saw it. Small invasions, but each one carving a deeper groove in me. So when I finally stood inside the restored cabin walls, glowing with fresh paint, fireplace humming with warmth, shelves lined with books and keepsakes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. This space was mine, not by accident, not by inheritance alone, but because I had fought for it. And yet even as I breathed in that hard-won peace, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. That very night, scrolling through social media, I noticed Allison had tagged me in a post. A throwback photo of us as kids at the cabin captioned, "Can't wait for my kids to make memories here too. #family tradition." I froze. The comments beneath were full of excited relatives. Yes, we should plan a trip. The mountains are calling. Let's make it an annual thing. No one had asked me. No one even mentioned me beyond the tag. It was as if they had already decided the cabin was theirs by default. I stared at the screen pulse quickening. The fortress I had built suddenly felt fragile. I set my phone down and walked to the porch. The mountains loomed in the distance, silent and watchful. Fireflies blinked lazily in the dark. Don't let them take this from you, I whispered to myself, because I knew. My family wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And when their plans collided with my boundaries, sparks would fly. I just didn't realize how soon. By the second year of restoration, the cabin no longer felt like a crumbling relic. It was alive again. The leaky roof was fixed, the porch sturdy, the interior warm and welcoming. When I walked through the door on weekends, it didn't smell like mildew anymore. It smelled of pine, fresh paint, and possibility. I had carved this place out of decay and grief, and in doing so, I had carved out a stronger version of myself. But peace never lasts long in my family. At first, the shift was subtle. A cousin would leave a comment online. "Wow, can't wait to visit." My aunt would mention in passing. "The cabin must feel so big for just one person." My parents would suggest, Doris' family gatherings up there would make Grandpa proud. They said it lightly, casually, like throwing stones into a pond. But each comment rippled through me, because I knew what those stones really were, markers claiming territory. And slowly their language shifted. It wasn't just your cabin anymore. It became the family cabin. The words appeared in texts and phone calls, even in my father's clipped voice when I told him about installing new appliances. "Well, I hope you're keeping receipts. Someday it'll matter when the whole family is using it." I bit back the urge to remind him that the deed had my name and my name alone. Instead, I smiled tightly and said Grandpa wanted me to have it. That's what matters. He didn't argue, but the silence on the other end of the line was heavy with disapproval. By spring, I noticed something else. My family was watching me more closely than I realized. I'd post a picture of the garden I'd started near the porch, wildflowers and herbs woven together in messy, beautiful chaos. Within an hour, Allison would text, "The kids would love to run around there. It's exactly the kind of space they need." I'd share a photo of the finished kitchen cabinets painted a cheerful blue. My Aunt Diana responded with, "Perfect for big family meals. We'll bring the turkey next Thanksgiving." It was as if each update I posted was an invitation I hadn't written. And though their words came dressed as enthusiasm, I recognized the truth beneath they were laying claim. That summer, I decided to take the final precaution. It started as a whisper of worry rumors from locals about minor vandalism, a broken lock here, a mailbox smashed there. Nothing major, but enough to unsettle me. My neighbors shrugged it off as summer boredom from teenagers, but my instincts told me to act. So I called a security company. They installed a system more comprehensive than most suburban homes. Motion-activated cameras, smart locks, floodlights, even a two-way communication system I could control from my phone. It was expensive, yes, but when the floodlights blazed across the driveway that first night, illuminating every corner, I felt a relief I hadn't realized I craved. I told myself it was for vandals, but deep down I knew better. I wasn't afraid of strangers, I was afraid of family. One evening, while sipping tea on the porch, my phone buzzed. A group chat notification. I frowned. Our family chat wasn't particularly active, just birthdays, holiday plans, and the occasional baby photo. I opened it, expecting a stray meme or my aunt's forwarded chain messages. Instead, I found 40 unread texts. Scrolling back, my stomach clenched. Allison had written, "Perfect. Your mountain cabin is just sitting there. We're making it our summer home." The messages after that tumbled fast and furious like dominoes falling. "Yes, the kids will love it," wrote Aunt Diana. "Count us in for the 4th of July week," Uncle Robert added. "Is there lake access?" "We'll bring the boat," chimed my cousin Thomas. Then the one that made my chest tighten, "Doris hardly uses it anyway. Better it's full of family than sitting empty. My own mother." I sat frozen on the porch phone, heavy in my hand. Message after message scrolled upward. Cousins planning which weeks they'd take, who would bring food, what activities they'd do. Photos of packed suitcases, kids grinning with excitement. Not one person had asked me. It was as if my ownership didn't exist at all. My hands trembled as I typed, "Hi everyone. I've seen the plans being discussed. I want to clarify. The cabin is my primary workspace when I'm not in Charlotte. I need advance notice for any visits, and I haven't given permission for these summer plans." The responses came instantly. Allison. "Oh, come on, Chris. You can work anywhere. Don't ruin this for the kids." My mother, honey, don't be difficult. Family should always feel welcome. Aunt Patricia. "We won't disturb your things, promise. We just need the mountain air." Uncle James. "It's not like you're there all the time anyway. Don't be selfish." Each reply was another knife twist. I typed again, firmer this time. "This is my home. I've put thousands of dollars and countless hours into restoring it. I expect my family to respect that. I need to be present if anyone visits." But my words sank into quicksand. My father. "You're overreacting. It's just family wanting to enjoy the place." Allison again. "Think of the kids. Stop being so territorial. Aunt Diana Harold would want the family to enjoy it, not just you." That last one burned, weaponizing Grandpa's memory, twisting his gift into a weapon against me. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, as their chatter continued, painting me as selfish, dramatic, unreasonable. And then Allison's final message appeared sharp as a blade. "We're leaving first thing tomorrow morning. 8-hour drive. Kids are packed. Thomas and Melanie are bringing their crew too. Should be 6 adults and 7 kids total for the first week." I blinked. 8 hours. The cabin was only 3 hours from Charlotte. Then it clicked. Allison had moved to Atlanta. She was planning to drive 8 hours to occupy my property without my permission. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was a plan already in motion. The mountains around me were dark, the crickets buzzing loud in the silence. I sat on the porch, staring at my phone, realizing with cold certainty this wasn't just about boundaries. It was an invasion. And tomorrow they were coming. I didn't sleep that night. My phone lay on the nightstand, buzzing every few minutes with new messages, each one another dismissal of my voice. I stared at the ceiling of my Charlotte apartment, my mind racing with scenarios. How far would they go? Would they really drive hours with children in tow just to force their way into a home that wasn't theirs? By dawn, my stomach was twisted in knots. I called my mother first. If anyone could speak reason into Allison, surely her own sister could. "Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "This situation is out of control. Allison is literally packing her car right now to drive to my property, without my permission." There was a long pause, then a sigh so heavy it seemed to carry years of disappointment. "Doris, it's just for the summer. I don't see why you're making such a fuss." "A fuss?" My voice cracked. "Mom, it's trespassing. It's my property. Grandpa left it to me, not the family, me." "Well," she said coolly, "that was his choice. But family shares Doris. You've always been so territorial, always making things harder than they need to be." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I felt my chest tighten, a rush of childhood memories where I'd been called selfish simply for wanting my own space. It's not about being territorial, I snapped. It's about respect, about boundaries. You raised me to believe family comes first, but you forgot to mention that my boundaries always come last. Don't exaggerate, she muttered. It's a vacation home. You don't live there full time. The family should enjoy it too. Grandpa would have wanted that. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. No, Mom. Grandpa wanted me to have the cabin because he knew you'd all treat it like property to carve up and consume. He trusted me to honor what it meant, and I won't let you twist his gift. Doris, her voice softened, but only with exasperation. You're embarrassing yourself. Don't ruin this summer for everyone. The line between us crackled with silence before I finally hung up. My hands shook, tears burning in my eyes. My own mother wouldn't stand by me. So I called Allison directly. She answered on the second ring, her voice falsely bright, almost mocking. Doris, perfect timing. I was just about to text you our arrival time tomorrow. We should be there by 4, traffic permitting. I took a deep breath. Allison, you cannot stay at my cabin tomorrow, or any day. You do not have my permission. There was a pause, then laughter, sharp, dismissive. Oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. We're family, not strangers breaking in. That's exactly what you'd be doing, I said coldly. Breaking in, trespassing. I've already told you no. Her voice hardened. Look, everyone's taken time off work. The kids are packed. We've been planning this for weeks. I froze. Weeks, and not one word to me until now. In all those weeks, I hissed. Did it not occur to you to ask me to get permission? I mentioned it to your mom, she said dismissively, as though that settled it. She thought it was a great idea. My mother doesn't speak for me, I snapped. She doesn't own the cabin. I do. Allison's tone turned icy. God, you're being so dramatic. My kids are 8, 10, and 12. They've been talking about this nonstop for days. Are you really going to disappoint children? The manipulation was so blatant, I nearly laughed. Nearly. But my voice came out like steel. I'm not disappointing anyone. You set them up for disappointment by promising them something you had no right to promise. There was silence. Then she spat the words that chilled me to my core. We're coming, Doris. You can either be reasonable about this or not, but we're coming. The whole family agrees this is the perfect plan for the summer. And then she hung up. I stared at the blank screen, pulse pounding in my ears. Almost immediately, my phone lit up again, this time with a storm of texts from other family members. From Aunt Patricia. Your cousin says you're being difficult. Harold would be so disappointed. From Uncle Robert. We just want to enjoy the mountains like we did when your grandfather was alive. Don't make this weird. From Thomas. My kids are so excited about fishing. Don't be the bad guy. From Uncle James. If it's about money, we can chip in for utilities, but family property should be for family. Every message piled on the pressure, twisting guilt into a weapon, just like they always had. I could almost hear their voices from years ago. Don't be selfish, Doris. Don't ruin this for everyone. I wanted to scream. Instead, I typed slowly, deliberately. The cabin is my home. It is not a timeshare. I will not be hosting anyone this summer. Please respect my boundaries. The replies poured in almost instantly. Allison, too late. We're already packed. Leaving at 5 a.m. If you're so worried, drive up and join us. Otherwise, stop being dramatic. My mother. Enough, Doris. Why are you acting like this? You're not yourself, my father. Your behavior is embarrassing. This isn't how we raised you. Each word landed like a blow. My hands trembled, vision blurring with angry tears. By evening, my Aunt Margaret called. She was the eldest sibling, the self-appointed mediator. Her voice was syrupy, coaxing, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Doris, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the cabin. There's no misunderstanding, I said flatly. The family is planning to use my property without permission. That's trespassing. She gave a soft laugh, the kind meant to soothe, but only inflamed. Goodness, such harsh language. No one's trespassing. We're just looking to spend some quality time together. At my home. Without invitation or consent, I corrected. Well, perhaps there could have been more communication, she conceded lightly. But plans are in motion. Allison's family is already set to drive tomorrow. Surely you can be flexible. Just this summer. I've installed a security system, I told her. No one will be able to enter without my authorization. A pause. A security system. Don't you think that's a bit extreme for family? Harold never even locked the doors. Things change, I said, my voice colder than the mountain air. And there's been vandalism in the area. Well, she said, tone cooling to match mine. I think you're overreacting. No one is going to damage your precious cabin. It's family, for goodness sake. I ended the call, my chest heaving. Night settled heavy around me, the city outside my apartment window buzzing with life, while inside I sat in silence, phone clutched in my hands. Notifications still poured in, accusations of selfishness, pleas about the children, guilt-laced reminders of Grandpa's generosity. But beneath all the noise, one truth rang clear. They weren't asking, they were coming. And tomorrow I would have to decide how far I was willing to go to defend what was mine. The shrill notification jolted me awake. My phone buzzed violently against the nightstand, the screen glowing in the dark. For a moment, I thought I'd overslept a client meeting, but then I saw the message. Motion detected at front path Martin cabin. My stomach dropped. I sat upright, fumbling to open the security app. The camera feed flickered, and there it was, a car pulling into my driveway, not one I recognized. Its headlights swept across the porch before cutting out. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the trees, mist curling low over the ground. And then another car pulled up behind it, and another. Within minutes, my driveway looked like a small caravan had arrived. The screen showed children tumbling out, shrieking with delight, running across the grass as if it were a playground. Adults followed, arms loaded with coolers, suitcases, folding chairs. I recognized faces instantly. Allison directing like a cruise ship captain, her husband Jason testing the front door handle, Thomas unloading fishing rods, Melanie herding kids toward the porch. They were here, and they weren't hesitating. My phone buzzed again, a text from Carl, my neighbor, whose property bordered mine. Your family's arriving with loads of luggage, quite a crowd. Didn't know you were expecting company. Want me to help them get settled? Settled. My pulse spiked. Not expected, not invited. I typed back, my fingers trembling. Do not help them. Call me. Seconds later, my phone rang. Carl's voice was steady but concerned. Doris, what's going on? They're everywhere. Kids are running through your garden. Jason's trying the front door. They're not supposed to be there, I said, my voice hollow. They planned this without my permission. I told them no. Do you want me to call the sheriff? I hesitated, staring at the screen where Jason was now checking under porch rocks, as if searching for a hidden key. My heart hammered against my ribs. Not yet, I whispered. Let me try something first. The feed showed chaos. The kids had discovered the side path, trampling through the wildflowers I'd carefully planted last spring. Their laughter rang faintly through the security system's microphone, bright and careless, oblivious to the destruction beneath their shoes. Jason circled the cabin, rattling each window one by one. His movements were deliberate testing, like a burglar who had done this before. Allison stood in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing sharply at Thomas and Melanie to unload faster. The sight triggered a rush of memories. Allison borrowing my sweater in high school, returning it with a cigarette burn, and shrugging when I cried. Thomas commandeering my laptop in college and deleting my essay draft. My mother opening my acceptance letter before I even got home from school. Each violation dressed up as closeness as family. And now they were doing it again, only bigger, only worse. Jason bent low at the side window, pulling something from his pocket. A small tool glinted in the morning light. He wasn't just testing now, he was trying to force it. My voice cracked when I spoke into the phone. Carl, he's trying to break in. That's breaking and entering, Carl said sharply. I'm calling the sheriff. Wait. A sudden clarity sliced through my panic. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow. Don't get mad. Get clear, especially when it's difficult. This was my moment. I opened the security app's control panel, thumb, hovering over the emergency protocol button. The system had been expensive, maybe overkill until now. With a single press, the property erupted. Floodlights blazed around the cabin, cutting through daylight like white fire. An ear-piercing alarm shrieked from every mounted speaker. The ground seemed to vibrate with sound. Attention, the automated voice bellowed. Unauthorized presence detected on private property. Security service notified. Vacate immediately. On the screen, chaos exploded. Children froze mid-run, then screamed, clutching their ears. Some burst into tears. Adults shouted, spinning around in panic. Jason stumbled back from the window, nearly losing his balance. Thomas dropped a cooler, its contents spilling across the driveway. Allison stood rigid, her face twisted in disbelief. Neighbors stepped onto their porches, shading their eyes against the sudden glare. I could see Carl in the background, phone pressed to his ear. The alarm shrieked mercilessly. I pressed the two-way communication button, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. Attention, I said, my words booming from every speaker. This is Doris Martin, the legal owner of this property. You are trespassing. I have not given permission for anyone to enter. Leave immediately. The effect was instantaneous. Heads snapped up, eyes wide, searching for the source. Allison shouted into the air, Doris, turn this off right now. You're scaring the children. Her words cut through the noise, but I didn't falter. A security service has been dispatched, I continued. I have video evidence of attempted forced entry. Leave now, or law enforcement will be contacted. Jason marched toward one of the cameras, his face inches from the lens. His voice was muffled through the mic, but furious. This is ridiculous. We're family, not criminals. Turn it off. Step away from the equipment, I replied, calm but firm. Tampering with security devices is also a criminal offense. You have 5 minutes to vacate before law enforcement is notified. The children cried harder. Melanie pulled hers toward the car, muttering frantically. Thomas looked torn between defiance and fear. But Allison didn't move. She clutched her phone, her eyes scanning wildly fury, radiating from her like heat. My phone buzzed. It was Allison calling. I switched to answer, muting the loudspeaker. What the hell do you think you're doing? She screamed. Protecting my property from trespassers, I said evenly. We are not trespassers. We are your family. You are trespassing, I repeated. I told you not to come. You ignored me. This is the consequence. You're traumatizing the children. You traumatized them, I snapped, by dragging them to a place you had no right to enter. Her breathing was ragged on the line. You've embarrassed us in front of the whole neighborhood. Do you realize what you've done? This isn't over, Doris. You'll regret this. And then she hung up. Through the cameras, I watched as the adults finally began to retreat. Luggage was hauled back to the cars, children shoved inside, faces streaked with tears. Jason muttered curses, throwing bags into the trunk with unnecessary force. But Allison lingered, glaring up at the nearest camera. Her mouth moved silently, but I could read it as clearly as if she'd shouted, "This isn't over." My phone pinged again, confirmation that the local security service had received the alert and dispatched a car. Relief and dread tangled in my chest. Because while the immediate invasion had been stopped, I knew what Allison meant. This battle wasn't finished. It had only just begun. The adrenaline from activating the alarm didn't fade easily. Even after the security company confirmed they were dispatching a car, my body still shook as though I had run a marathon. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment, staring at my phone, replaying the images of my cousins scattering in the floodlights like startled intruders. But then another thought clawed its way through my panic. What if they tried again? The idea of my cabin, my sanctuary being surrounded by cars, children trampling the garden, Jason forcing a window, it was unbearable. I needed to see it with my own eyes. By noon, I had packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and thrown it into the back seat of my car. The 3-hour drive stretched ahead like a battlefield march. The mountains rose slowly on the horizon, green ridges stacked like waves frozen in time. Usually that view calmed me, grounding me in memories of weekends with Grandpa. The steady rhythm of our hikes, his hand warm on my shoulder as we paused to catch our breath. But today the sight made my chest tighten. I wasn't driving toward peace. I was driving toward confrontation. My phone buzzed nonstop on the passenger seat. Missed calls from my mother, my father Allison. Text after text, each more scathing than the last. Doris, this isn't like you. You've humiliated the family. How could you treat children that way? I turned on Do Not Disturb and kept driving. When I pulled into the gravel driveway at last, the cabin stood tall against the backdrop of pines, unchanged by the morning chaos. The security officer's car was still parked near the porch. Relief washed through me until I noticed movement down the road. 3 cars sat just beyond the split-rail fence marking my property line, their engines' idled exhaust curling in the mountain air. Doors opened as soon as I arrived. Allison emerged, first arms crossed, her posture rigid with fury. Jason followed, jaw tight, sunglasses hiding his eyes. Thomas and Melanie trailed behind, looking uneasy. Their kids remained in the cars, small faces pressed against the windows, wide-eyed. The officer stepped forward as I got out, giving me a brief nod. They refused to leave the area, he said quietly. Said they wanted to speak with you directly. I stayed to make sure things didn't escalate. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the fence gravel, crunching under my shoes. The air was thick with tension, the kind you could slice with a knife. Doris Allison began, her voice tight. I can't believe you would embarrass us like that. Alarms. Floodlights. Calling security on your own family. What is wrong with you? I met her glare steadily. What's wrong with me? You tried to break into my home. It's a family cabin, she snapped. No, I said, my voice firm. It's my cabin. Grandpa left it to me. The deed is in my name. Legally and morally, it is mine. Thomas stepped forward, his expression torn between pleading and frustration. Come on, Doris. We just wanted the kids to have a summer in the mountains. Is that really so terrible? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of children's eyes watching from the cars. I'm sorry the kids are upset, truly. But you set them up for disappointment, not me. You made promises you had no right to make. Melanie's voice cut in sharp with resentment. You've always been like this, never willing to share, always keeping things for yourself. This isn't about sharing, I said, heat rising in my cheeks. This is about respect, about boundaries. Would you walk into a stranger's house and unload your luggage without asking? The fact that we're related doesn't make it different. Jason, who had been silent until now, suddenly exploded. Do you have any idea how much planning went into this? How much time off work we took? The kids have been excited for weeks. You ruined everything. No, I said coldly. You ruined it the moment you planned this behind my back. Allison's voice dropped low and cutting. Grandpa would be ashamed. He always welcomed family at this cabin. Always. The words hit like a knife to the chest. I had to steady my breathing before I answered. Grandpa welcomed invited guests. He didn't appreciate people trampling his boundaries, and that's exactly why he left the cabin to me. He trusted me to protect it. Silence hung heavy. For a moment, I almost thought I saw uncertainty flicker across her face, but then she squared her shoulders and sneered. This isn't over. You'll regret treating us like criminals. Before I could respond, Carl appeared, walking down from his own property, coffee mug in hand. He looked from me to Jason, then back again. I saw your husband trying that window this morning, he said to Allison, his voice calm but firm. That's not family tradition. That's breaking and entering. Jason's face flushed crimson. I was just checking if it was locked. You were never locked out, I countered. You were never invited in. The security officer cleared his throat. Legally, Miss Martin is correct. This is private property in her name alone. If you continue to linger, we'll have to involve law enforcement. Jason muttered something under his breath. Thomas looked down at the gravel, shuffling his feet. Melanie tightened her grip on his arm. But Allison didn't budge. She stared at me across the fence, her voice steady and venomous. When you need family, Doris, when you're sick or broke or alone, don't come running to us. Remember this moment. The threat hung in the cool mountain air. I wanted to scream to remind her that family support shouldn't be conditional on blind obedience, that Grandpa would have despised this entitlement. But I saw the futility in her eyes. Instead, I drew a breath and said, I think this conversation is over. Please leave. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jason tugged Allison's arm. Let's go, he muttered. It's not worth it. She yanked away, but finally turned back toward the cars. One by one, the adults climbed in. Engines roared to life. The caravan pulled away slowly, kids peering out of back windows with confused faces pressed to glass. The silence afterward was deafening. The officer gave me a nod. You want us to increase patrols for a while? Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. Please. When he left, I turned to Carl. He studied me with concern. You okay? I let out a shaky laugh. Not really. But I will be. Because for the first time, standing at that fence line, I had drawn a line my family couldn't step across. And though guilt still gnawed at me, the sight of those disappointed children seared into my mind, I knew this was necessary. Grandpa had trusted me, and I wouldn't betray that trust no matter the cost. As I walked back up the drive toward the cabin, the porch lights flicked on automatically. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet, familiar and steady. I sank into Grandpa's old chair, staring out at the darkening mountains, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't finished. Allison's last words echoed like a curse. When you need family, don't come running to us. They weren't leaving defeated. They were retreating to plan their next move. And I would have to be ready. When the dust settled and the last car disappeared down the mountain road, I collapsed into the porch chair like a soldier after battle. The silence felt unreal after the chaos. No alarms, no shouting, no pounding footsteps across the porch. Only the distant call of a wood thrush and the faint whisper of wind through pines. But peace didn't last. My phone lit up with fury. 20 missed calls, 40 new messages, then 60. Each one carried the same refrain like a chorus rehearsed long before the fight ever began. From my mother. How could you humiliate your cousins like this? They just wanted to spend time together. You've traumatized the children. From my father. Your behavior today was shameful. You owe the family an apology. This isn't how we raised you. From Allison. Do you know what you've done? The kids cried the whole way back. Everyone saw the alarms, the neighbors watched. You've embarrassed us beyond repair. I tossed the phone onto the table, heart pounding. Each message was a dagger, twisted deeper, yet so familiar accusations I had heard in some form all my life. Selfish, difficult, dramatic, embarrassing. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind was a hive of buzzing thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's hands on the window frame, the children crying under the floodlights, Allison's face contorted in fury as she spat. This isn't over. Around 3 a.m., I gave up. I padded into the kitchen, poured tea, and sat by the window, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. Their small lights reminded me of Grandpa's voice, "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow." But the guilt clawed at me all the same. Was I cruel? Could I have handled it differently? Had I really traumatized those kids? The questions spiraled until dawn broke pale light, seeping across the mountains. By mid-morning, the guilt campaign escalated. My Aunt Patricia left a voicemail, her tone syrupy, but edged with steel. Doris, dear, no one meant harm. We just wanted to make memories. You've turned this into something ugly. Harold would never have locked us out like that. Don't tarnish his legacy. Uncle Robert sent a curt text, "Don't make this weird. It's just family. Stop acting like a landlord." Even my father emailed me, as if writing from his law office made the condemnation more official. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed yourself. If you continue down this path, don't expect our support in the future. Support. That word made me laugh out loud, bitter and sharp. When had they ever supported me? When I cried over stolen belongings as a child. When my sister read my diary aloud at dinner. When my parents dismissed every attempt I made to set boundaries. No support in my family was a one-way street. For 2 days, I didn't leave the cabin. I turned off my phone except for quick checks of the security system. The silence was heavy, but it was a relief compared to the barrage of accusations. I spent the hours sanding the deck rails, sweeping pine needles from the porch, watering my small garden. Mundane tasks that grounded me in the physical world. Every creak of wood, every brush of dirt beneath my nails reminded me that this place was real, mine. And yet loneliness pressed in. At night, I sat by the fireplace watching flames lick the stone and wondered if Allison was right. Had I burned a bridge I could never rebuild? Was I really alone now, stripped of family, in exchange for a piece of land? On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. I almost ignored it, assuming another lecture. But the sender made me pause. Emily, my younger sister. Her text was short, almost shy. That sounds intense. For what it's worth, I think they were out of line. Grandpa left it to you for a reason. Love you. I stared at the screen, tears stinging my eyes. Emily rarely took sides in family matters. She was the quiet one, the peacemaker. For her to acknowledge even briefly that I wasn't crazy, it meant more than she could know. An hour later, another surprise arrived in my inbox. An email from my cousin Marcus, who lived in California and barely participated in family gatherings. Heard about the cabin drama. Respect for standing your ground. They'll get over it eventually. I exhaled, tension easing slightly. Maybe not everyone saw me as the villain. But then came a longer message that unsettled me in a different way. It was from Uncle David, my father's quieter brother. Doris. While I don't approve of how things escalated with the alarms, I understand why you felt cornered. The cabin is legally yours, and that should have been respected. Give people time to cool down. These things have a way of settling themselves. It wasn't full support, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was something rare in my family acknowledgement. And though it didn't erase the storm, it gave me a glimmer of hope. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The mountains stretched out before me, shadows long across the ridges. Fireflies blinked again, their lights steady and patient. I whispered into the cooling air as though Grandpa could hear. I did what you taught me. I held my ground. And for the first time since the invasion, I felt a small ember of peace glowing inside me. But it flickered against a darker truth, because while some voices had softened, others had only sharpened. And I knew Allison well enough to understand one thing. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. The weeks after what I now called the invasion attempt were strangely quiet. The family group chat, usually buzzing with birthday reminders or last-minute potluck sign-ups, went silent. Not a single meme, not even the usual photo updates of my nieces and nephews. At first, the silence felt like peace. but soon it grew heavy thick with unspoken resentment. I could almost hear the conversations happening behind my back, the whispers at Sunday dinners I no longer attended. They weren't ignoring me, they were regrouping. I stayed at the cabin for 2 weeks straight, working remotely. Every morning, I made coffee on the stove Grandpa had installed decades ago, then carried the mug out to the porch to watch fog curl through the trees. Every night, I sat by the fireplace, its steady crackle a counterpoint to the storm inside me. The quiet was healing, but my mind wouldn't rest. Guilt gnawed at me in the small hours of the night. The children's frightened cries still echoed in my head, their small hands clamped over their ears as the alarms blared. I reminded myself it wasn't my fault that their parents had dragged them into a battle they didn't understand. But the image stayed with me. And then there were my parents' words: selfish, embarrassing, not how we raised you. Old wounds split open under the weight of new ones. I realized that standing my ground at the cabin had touched something deeper. This wasn't just about property. It was about decades of being told I was wrong for wanting autonomy, selfish for needing space. Finally, I made an appointment with a therapist back in Charlotte. Dr. Lawson was a calm woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a habit of tapping her pen lightly against her notebook when she listened. During our second session, I spilled the whole story: the will, the restoration, the group chat, the invasion, the alarms. When I finished, she leaned back, pen still in hand. "What you're describing is a family system that doesn't respect boundaries," she said gently. "Your grandfather seems to have recognized this dynamic. That may be why he left the cabin to you directly." Her words made my throat tighten. Everyone keeps saying I'm selfish for not sharing. Maybe they're right. She shook her head. There's a difference between generosity and being taken advantage of. Healthy families respect boundaries. From what you've described, yours doesn't. That doesn't make you selfish. It makes you aware. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that someone finally saw the truth I had carried alone for years. In the weeks that followed, therapy became a lifeline. We unraveled childhood moments that had seemed small at the time but built a pattern. My sister reading my diary aloud while my parents laughed. My father lecturing me for being dramatic when I cried. Over stolen belongings. My mother telling me to stop making everything about myself whenever I tried to express hurt. These weren't isolated events, Dr. Lawson explained. They trained you to believe your boundaries were a problem. And now as an adult, when you enforce them, your family responds with the same accusations: selfish, dramatic, difficult. Hearing it framed that way was both painful and liberating. It meant the invasion wasn't just about the cabin, it was the culmination of years of a family culture where my needs never mattered. At night in the cabin, I thought about Grandpa, about how he had always pulled me aside away from the noise of family gatherings into the quiet of the porch or the woods. "You don't need to please them all," he'd say, handing me a fishing pole. "You just need to know who you are and hold on to it." I hadn't realized until now just how much he had been trying to prepare me. Still, the cost of holding on to myself felt steep. The guilt campaign from my relatives hadn't ended. It had simply gone underground. When I finally checked the family chat after 3 weeks of silence, I found dozens of messages not addressed to me, but clearly about me. Aunt Diana kids keep asking why they can't go back to the cabin. It breaks my heart. Uncle James. Some people forget family should come first. Harold would be disappointed. Allison. She thinks she's better than the rest of us. I don't know what happened to her. The words stung, but this time they didn't slice as deep. Therapy had given me armor. I typed nothing, simply closed the app and went outside to water my garden. Not all the messages were bitter. Emily texted again. "Proud of you for standing firm. Don't let them gaslight you. You're doing the right thing." And Marcus sent a photo from California, him standing on a beach, captioned, "Freedom looks good on you. Keep it up." Those small lights of support flickered against the darkness, reminding me that family didn't have to mean blood. Family could mean people who respected my boundaries even from 1,000 miles away. I began building something new at the cabin. I painted the kitchen cabinets a shade of blue. Grandpa would have teased as too cheerful for mountain living. I hosted Carl and his wife Diane for dinner, laughter spilling across the porch as we grilled under string lights. I met other neighbors, people who understood the difference between invitation and entitlement. When I invited them for a cookout, the joy I felt was almost overwhelming. For the first time, guests filled the cabin not because they demanded entry, but because I wanted them there. That difference changed everything. And yet underneath the laughter and warmth, a shadow lingered. Allison had gone quiet. Too quiet. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. I knew her well enough to recognize it the way she seethed in silence before returning twice as determined. She hadn't forgiven me. She hadn't forgotten. And though I didn't know how or when I could feel it in my bones, Allison wasn't finished with me. Not yet. By Thanksgiving, the silence in the family group chat had thinned into something else: avoidance. There were no direct attacks, no open accusations. Instead, there were cheerful updates passed around as though nothing had happened. Birthday pictures, recipes, a blurry snapshot of a new puppy. But underneath the surface, the wound still throbbed. When my mother called to discuss plans, her voice was unusually bright, brittle, like glass under pressure. So she began, "We're hosting Thanksgiving this year. Everyone will be there. You'll come, of course." A part of me wanted to say no outright, to spend the holiday in the cabin with Emily, where the air was clean and the laughter genuine. But another part of me knew avoidance wouldn't heal anything. If I wanted my boundaries to mean something, I had to practice them in the lion's den. "I'll come," I said finally, "but I'll be staying at a hotel, not at your house." There was a pause. "That seems unnecessary," she said, voice tight. "We have plenty of room." "I prefer my own space," I replied simply. Another pause, then a sigh. "Fine, as you wish." It was a small victory, but a victory all the same. The hotel room felt like a shield when I arrived in town the night before Thanksgiving. Neutral ground. My space, no one else's. I unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet hum of the heater, the weight of the keycard in my pocket, boundaries made tangible. The next day, as I pulled into my parents' driveway, I could already feel the tension thick in the air. Laughter floated from inside, but when I walked through the door, the noise faltered for a split second. Eyes flicked toward me, then away. Emily broke the silence first, hugging me tightly. "Hey, you made it," she whispered. Her smile was genuine, and it steadied me. But across the room, Allison sat stiffly at the dining table, her children clustered around her. She didn't look up, didn't smile, didn't say a word. Dinner was a minefield. Every conversation carried double edges. Uncle Robert raised his glass. "Isn't it wonderful to have the whole family together, just like old times?" "Almost the whole family," Allison muttered, just loud enough for the table to hear. Laughter rippled uncomfortably. My fork paused halfway to my mouth, but I said nothing. Later, Aunt Diana leaned across the table. "Doris, dear, how's the cabin? Must be lonely up there all by yourself." "It's peaceful," I said calmly. "I like the quiet." "Well, peace is nice," she said, her smile sharp. "But family is better, don't you think?" I felt Emily's hand brush against mine under the table, a silent anchor. I forced a smile and replied, "Peace and family aren't the same thing. Sometimes peace has to come first." The silence that followed was thick. After dinner, I slipped outside to the porch to breathe. The air was sharp with autumn chill leaves skittering across the driveway. I leaned against the railing, staring at the dark sky. Behind me, the door creaked open. Allison stepped out, arms wrapped around herself. She stood a few feet away, her voice low. "You think you won, don't you?" I turned slowly. "This isn't about winning, Allison. It's about respect." She laughed bitterly. "Respect. You humiliated me. My kids cried for hours that day. Do you know how hard it was to explain why their cousin locked them out of the cabin their great-grandfather built? Grandpa left it to me because he knew you'd treat it like this," I said quietly. "Like something you're entitled to, not something sacred." Her eyes glittered in the porch light. "You think you're the only one who loved him? The only one who deserves his legacy?" "I think I'm the only one who listened to what he wanted," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't over." She said it the same way she had in the driveway weeks before, a promise, not a threat. And then she walked back inside, leaving the night colder than before. Back at the hotel, I replayed the encounter over and over. Her words rang in my ears, heavy with unfinished business. "This isn't over." I knew her too well. Allison didn't let go of grudges. She nurtured them, fed them, turned them into weapons. As I lay in the sterile hotel bed, I thought of Grandpa again, of the way he would hold a fishing line taut, warning me, "Patience is the trick, Doris. Fish don't fight right away. They wait until you relax." Allison was waiting, and I had no illusions that the next strike would be softer than the first. But for now, I had something she couldn't take away. I had survived dinner without bending. I had left the table with my boundaries intact. I had shown myself and my family that I wasn't the little girl they could guilt into submission anymore. It was a fragile victory, but in families like mine, fragility was everything. December settled over the mountains with quiet grace. Snow dusted the cabin roof, turning the pine trees into white-tipped sentinels. The air was sharp clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke and frost. For the first time in months, I felt truly at home. Emily arrived 2 days before Christmas, her arms full of groceries, cheeks flushed from the cold. "It's like a postcard up here," she said, dropping bags onto the counter. "You've made it even cozier than I remember." We spent the next few days cooking elaborate meals, laughing over board games, hiking along snow-packed trails. At night, we curled by the fire, sipping cocoa while the flames cast golden light across the cabin walls. For once, there were no accusations, no manipulation, no battles for control, just warmth, peace, and the quiet bond of two sisters who had chosen to stand beside each other. "This is the most peaceful holiday I can remember," Emily murmured, one night stretching her legs toward the fire. "You know, I used to think you were overreacting about the family, but after everything, I get it now. And honestly, I admire you. I don't think I could have stood up the way you did." Her words melted something inside me. The little girl who had once been told she was selfish, dramatic, embarrassing, she finally felt vindicated. Seen. In the days that followed, I poured my energy back into the cabin. I painted the guest room a soft sage green, replaced the deck furniture with sturdy pieces I'd chosen myself, strung fairy lights across the porch. Each change was a declaration. This is mine, mine to shape, mine to protect. For the first time in years, I felt a deep sense of alignment. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was a mirror of my own transformation from a woman weighed down by guilt and obligation to someone who knew her worth and held her boundaries without apology. I had thought losing my family's approval would leave me hollow, but instead the space they vacated filled with something richer, self-respect. Still, the shadows lingered. My parents remained cool, their calls perfunctory and clipped. Allison stayed icy, her silence sharp as broken glass. At Thanksgiving, she had promised, "This isn't over." And though weeks had passed without confrontation, I could feel her waiting in the wings, biding her time. Sometimes at night, I stood on the porch, listening to the forest creak in the wind. The security cameras blinked their steady red lights, reminding me I was protected. But a part of me knew the real battle wasn't over locks and alarms. It was over history, resentment, entitlement, the kind of war that doesn't end with one fight. And yet I felt ready. By spring, the thaw set in. The mountains turned lush again, streams rushing with melted snow. Life in Charlotte pulled me back deadlines, clients, city noise. But every Friday, I packed my car and drove to the cabin. Each time I pulled into the driveway, the sight of the porch lights flickering on made my chest loosen. This wasn't just a retreat. It was a fortress, a sanctuary, a living testament that I could protect what mattered most. One evening in May, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea in Grandpa's old cup. The sky glowed lavender as fireflies began to rise from the grass. The air hummed with the promise of summer. I thought of Grandpa, his laugh, his steady hand on my shoulder, his words that had carried me through. "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow." "Thank you," I whispered into the twilight. "I finally understand." For the first time, the peace that filled me wasn't fragile. It was hard-won, rooted, real. Inside, my phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. From an unknown number. No words, just a photo. A picture of the cabin taken from the road. The hair on my arms prickled. My pulse quickened. Allison's silence hadn't been surrender after all. It was a prelude. And though I had reclaimed my sanctuary, I knew one thing with chilling certainty: the war for my boundaries wasn't finished. Not yet.